My name is Sam. Or it was. By the time anyone finds this footage, I doubt that name will mean much of anything. This is the last entry in my video diary. It's day 28 at Site B. The generators are still running, just like the contract says. But the contract didn't mention the listeners. It never mentioned what would happen if I turned the big dish on. It all started with an ad. Not some shady posting on the dark web, but a legitimate-looking listing from a private defense contractor. They needed a resident technician for a remote Arctic monitoring station. The requirements were simple: a background in mechanical engineering, experience with diesel generators, and the ability to tolerate extreme isolation. The pay was the kind of number you only see in lottery winnings. Enough to wipe out my debts, my mortgage, my whole miserable life in one 30-day stretch. The interview was a video call with a man who called himself Mr. Glass. He had a sterile, digital-looking face and a voice as flat as a dial tone. He told me the site was a decommissioned over-the-horizon radar station from the Cold War. "Think of it as industrial archaeology, Sam," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. "The site is being preserved for its historical value. Your job is purely custodial. Keep the backup generators running at minimal load. That's it. The main array and its operations center are offline. They are structurally unsound and dangerous. You are forbidden from entering. Is that clear?" It was more than clear. It was perfect. I'm good with my hands. I'm good with solitude. My last job on a North Sea oil rig had ended badly. A pressure valve I was supposed to have triple-checked, a subsequent explosion, 2 men injured. It wasn't my fault, not entirely, but the blame stuck to me like crude oil. After that, solitude was a friend. So I said yes. The helicopter ride in was the last time I felt connected to the world. We flew for hours over a seamless, blinding white canvas. Then a dark smudge appeared on the horizon. As we got closer, the smudge resolved into a structure of impossible scale. It was the array, a colossal, skeletal fence of steel latticework, 100 feet high and 1,000 feet wide, curved like a fragment of a giant's sphere. It was aimed at nothing, just the empty northern sky. At its base huddled a few squat concrete buildings, SAWC, barracks, a generator shed, and the main operations center. The pilot didn't even shut the engines down. He helped me unload my gear, shouted something about the weather window over the rotor wash, and was gone. Then, silence. The kind of absolute, profound silence that presses in on you, that has a physical weight. The only sound was the wind, a low, mournful whisper across the top of the snow. It was day 1. I was the sole inhabitant of a steel island, in a sea of ice. The first week was about routine. It was my shield against the crushing emptiness. Wake up, make coffee, walk the perimeter fence, check the generators. The 2 big diesel engines sat in a concrete shed, thrumming away with a steady, reassuring rhythm. They were my only companions. My job was to keep them fed, keep them happy. Mr. Glass had been specific. They weren't powering anything critical, just some heat tracing for the pipes and a low-level power feed to the barracks. It seemed like a colossal waste of fuel, but the paycheck told me not to ask questions. I set up my camera in the small common room of the barracks, next to a faded photo of men in parkas posing in front of the array half a century ago. Video, diary, day 3, I'd say, trying to sound cheerful. All systems nominal. The quiet takes some getting used to. You start to hear things that aren't there. The blood in your ears. The creaking of your own bones. I laughed, but it was a hollow sound. The truth was, the silence wasn't entirely silent. The wind, the hum of the generators. They had voices, if you listened long enough. The unraveling began on day 8. I was outside checking the fuel lines and I heard it. In a lull between gusts of wind, I heard what sounded like talking. A faint conversational murmur, too distant to make out words. I scanned the horizon, a full 360 degrees of pristine, unbroken white. Nothing. Not a bird, not a fox. Nothing. I shook my head, blamed it on the wind whistling through the array's steel bones. Auditory pareidolia, the brain's desperate attempt to find patterns in chaos. I mentioned it in my video diary that night, trying to rationalize it, to prove to myself I wasn't losing my grip. A few days later, I saw them for the first time. I was in the barracks, looking out the reinforced window towards the distant ridge. That marked the edge of the world, and I saw a shape, a dark vertical line against the snow. It was miles away, too far to be anything but a trick of the light, a sundog or an ice shadow. I grabbed my binoculars, my hands trembling slightly. The air was shimmering with cold, the image blurry, but it was there. It wasn't a rock. It was too symmetrical, too deliberate. It was just standing there. Motionless, I told myself it was nothing. I went back to my duties, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, I looked again. The shape was still there, but it had moved, maybe 100 yards to the left. My heart hammered against my ribs. It could be a snowdrift, I told myself. The wind changes them. But I knew that was a lie. That night, sleep offered no escape. I dreamt of static, of whispering voices buried just beneath the noise, speaking in a language of clicks and guttural stops. I woke up shivering, the hum of the generator seeming louder, more malevolent than before. I needed a distraction, something to ground me. I decided to properly search the barracks. In a rusted footlocker under a collapsed bunk, I found them, the old station logs. Hardcover, military-issue notebooks filled with neat, cursive handwriting. For hours, I read. Most of it was painfully mundane. Weather reports, maintenance schedules, complaints about the food. It was a chronicle of crushing, boredom, written by men just as isolated as I was. But then I got to the final logbook, dated 1987, the year before the station was officially decommissioned. The entries became shorter, more erratic. October the 17th. Unscheduled signals detected on passive array. Low frequency, rhythmic, not Soviet. October 21st. The signals are responsive, seem to mimic our own low-band radio chatter. Jenkins says it's atmospheric bounce. I don't think so. November 3rd. We see them on the ridge now. The long-range cameras can't resolve them. Just dark shapes. The whispers on the radio follow them. And then the final entry, scrawled in a panicked, barely legible hand. November 12th. They're listening. They're always listening. It's the radio waves they follow. Don't transmit. For God's sake, don't transmit. God help us, they're listening. I slammed the book shut, my blood running cold. Jenkins. I'd seen that name before. In the front of the book, there was a list of the station crew. Next to one name, a medic's note. Technician R. Jenkins. Medevac, acute psychosis. The next day, there were 3 of them on the ridge. 3 dark, silent figures standing sentinel against the white expanse. I spent the entire day watching them through my binoculars. They never moved. Not in any way that I could see, but the arrangement of them changed. It was like one of those find the difference puzzles. I'd look away for a few minutes, and when I looked back, their spacing would be different. Their formation altered. They were playing with me. My video diary entries became unhinged. I know they did. I'd rant at the camera, a wild-eyed man in a parka demanding to know who they were. "Is this part of the test, Mr. Glass?" I'd scream into the lens. "Is this some kind of psychological experiment? Because let me tell you, it's working." But there was no one to hear me. The satellite phone was for outgoing emergencies only. I was utterly, completely alone. Or rather, I wasn't. I was alone with them. On day 18, I found the markings. I was doing my generator checks, my head on a swivel, constantly glancing towards the ridge. I ran my hand along the cold metal housing of generator B and felt it. Scratches, deep gauges in the thick paint. I knelt, my breath misting in the frigid air. They weren't random. It was a pattern, a series of jagged peaks and troughs. It looked like a waveform, an audio signal carved in steel, and it was new. I had inspected every inch of this equipment when I arrived. This was not there before. Something had come inside the perimeter fence. That was the turning point. Fear gave way to a cold, burning anger. This wasn't a ghost story. This wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. This was real. And the heart of it, the answer to all of it, was sitting in that forbidden building. The silent giant at the center of the station. The operations center. The warning from Mr. Glass replayed in my mind. Structurally unsound and dangerous. A lie. It had to be. It wasn't a safety warning. It was an order to keep me from the truth. My paranoia coalesced into a single, sharp point of certainty. My employer was using this station for something, and those figures on the ridge were connected to it. I wasn't just a caretaker, I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. And I was done being a pawn. The padlock on the operations center door was thick and rusted. It took me an hour with a bolt cutter from the tool shed, the snap of the metal, echoing like a gunshot in the silence. The door groaned open, and I was hit by a blast of stale, frigid air that smelled of ozone and decay. I stepped inside. It was like stepping into a tomb. Banks of gigantic analog computers lined the walls, their tape reels and vacuum tubes thick with dust. In the center of the room was a huge circular console, like the bridge of a forgotten starship, all of. It aimed at a massive curved screen that was dark and lifeless. This was the brain, the nerve center of the silent giant outside. For the next 5 days, I worked. The engineer in me took over, drowning out the fear. It was the most alive I'd felt in years. This was my penance for the oil rig, my chance, to prove I was still sharp, still good at what I did. I was meticulous. I cleaned every contact, traced every wire, cross-referenced crumbling schematics I found in a filing cabinet. I bypassed the main power grid and carefully ran a new line from one of the secondary generators. I was bringing the beast back to life. My video diary entries from that time are manic, focused. I'm explaining complex wiring diagrams to the camera, justifying my every move. They can't just leave this technology to rot, I'd say, my voice hoarse. Whatever they're hiding, whatever this place is really for, the world deserves to know. All the while, I could feel them watching. I'd catch glimpses of movement through the grimy windows of the ops center, a flicker of motion on the ridge. Once, I swear I saw one of them, much closer, just beyond the perimeter fence, its head turning slowly, unnaturally, to face the building. They knew what I was doing. They were waiting. Day 27. It was done. The consoles were clean. The power was routed. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I stood before the main control panel, my hand hovering over a large red switch labeled Array Power. This was it. I wasn't going to transmit. The logbook had been very clear about that. But listening, just listening. What harm could that do? I took a deep breath and flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing. Then a low hum vibrated up through the soles of my boots. One by one, lights on the consoles flickered to life. The soft green glow of vacuum tubes filled the room with an eerie light. The giant was waking up. I moved to the passive sensor station, a complex array of dials and speakers. I put on the headphones and turned the main gain dial. The sound that flooded my ears was pure static, the sound of the universe whispering to itself. I began to turn the tuning knob, sweeping through the frequencies. And then I heard it. Beneath the hiss, there was something else. A low, rhythmic clicking. A series of guttural, throaty sounds. It was organic. It was a language. It was the sound from my nightmares. My hands shook as I worked the triangulation controls, the old analog system whirring as it cross-referenced the signal. After a minute, the coordinates locked. I looked at the large map of the region on the wall. The red dot indicating the signal's origin was blinking steadily. Right on top of the ridge, it was them, the figures on the horizon. They weren't just standing there, they were talking to each other. My blood felt like ice in my veins. I stood there, frozen, just listening to this impossible alien chatter. I should have turned it off. I should have run, but I couldn't. I had to know more. I adjusted the input, trying to get a clear signal, and that's when the second voice came through. It wasn't distant. It wasn't faint. It was loud. It was clear, and it was close. I ripped the headphones off, my heart seizing in my chest. The sound was now coming from the main speakers in the console. The same guttural, clicking language, but sharp, defined, a direct response. I frantically worked the directional controls, swinging the array's virtual ear around. The signal strength meter shot into the red. I pinpointed the source. It was coming from less than 100 yards away. It was coming from just inside the perimeter fence. My eyes darted to the small, grainy security monitor I'd set up, its camera aimed at the generator shed. And I saw it. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a trick of the light. A figure was standing. There. It was impossibly tall and gaunt, its limbs elongated, bent at angles that weren't quite human. It was wrapped in dark, tattered rags that did little to hide its emaciated frame. As I watched, paralyzed, it slowly turned its head to look directly at the operations center. It had no face that I could see, just a smooth, pale expanse of skin. But I knew it was looking at me. And in that instant, everything clicked into place, with the cold, final certainty of a coffin lid slamming shut. The logbooks, the warnings from Mr. Glass, the listeners. The job was never about the generators. The generators were the lure. For decades, this station had been silent, cold. My job was to turn on the lights, to provide a pocket of warmth, of sound, of life in the vast, dead emptiness. I was a human signal flare. The contract, the money. It was all a lie to get a warm body out here, a tripwire to see if the listeners were still active, to see if they would come down from the ridges when they sensed life again, by powering up the array, by listening. I hadn't just confirmed they were there. I had answered them. I had sent the signal they had been waiting for all these silent years. I'd picked up the phone on a line that should have remained dead forever, which brings me to now, back in the barracks. It's been maybe an hour. The camera's red light is the only thing that feels real. The guttural clicking is no longer just on the radio. I can hear it outside. It's a chorus now, coming from all directions. They're here. They're all here. I stumbled back from the ops center, slammed the barracks door, and threw the heavy bolt. A pathetic gesture. The wind has stopped. The only sounds are the steady hum of the generators and the crunching of snow outside. Slow. Deliberate. Footsteps. I finally understand. They weren't drawn to radio waves in the way we understand them. They were drawn to the intention behind them, to the consciousness. They are a kind of psychic echo, imprinted on this desolate landscape, and the focused energy of the radar gave them a focal point. For 50 years, they've been wandering the wilderness, whispering in the static, waiting for someone to turn the lights on, waiting for someone to listen. There's a scraping sound now, at the door. Metal on metal. My name is Sam. I am 38 years old. I took this job to pay off a debt. I think I'm about to pay a different one. The generator is still running. I fulfilled my contract. Tell Mr. Glass. Tell him his tripwire worked. The crunching in the snow. It's on the roof now. They're everywhere. I was so wrong. They were never just listening for a signal. They were waiting for an invitation.